It's also, as Onyx pointed out, a very lean game. Like, this took about 5 hours of stream time. 5.5. Richard McGonigal, yes. Yes. It's a very lean game. There's not a... There is... It takes exactly enough time to tell its story and then get out. Which I can't say about Uncharted 4 in the Druckmann games. The Last of Us games. That's been kind of a problem that Naughty Dog's been having lately, is that they spend way longer to tell their stories than they have to. And I guess it's not really Naughty Dog. That's more of a games in general these days. Like, in these days, 20 hours is kind of the minimum. Yes, that's also true. Where Tomb Raider had a lot of collectibles that ended up being really superfluous. I don't think... I will say, I never got all the collectibles in any one of the Tomb Raider games, but in all 3 of the Uncharted PS3 games, I got all 61 treasures. I finished those games to completion. I played Uncharted 2 and 3 and even 1 on the hardest difficulties back in those days. Yeah, the RPGification, that's a whole different thing that we could get into, but back in these early PS3 days, it's a very lean third-person shooter that doesn't need to be very, very long. If I move over, hold a moment, to my monitor, I have a video of the PS3 version's extras, and I assume this version's the same, because it's the same game, but they might not be in high res the way that this version is. Let me just verify that my output is correct for this computer. All right. We're good, so you guys should be able to hear. And if you cannot hear, let me know. Making of Uncharted Part 1. Thank you. I'll refill this after this first movie. Turn it down a little bit.
When we set out to work on our next-gen game for the PlayStation 3, we really wanted to do something special, something that was completely different that nobody's ever seen before. You know, we looked at what was out there, the landscape of games that were being developed, and everything sort of had this dark and gray or brown look to it. So we wanted to go completely opposite that, and we wanted to have a game that when somebody just caught it out of the corner of their eye walking past it in the store, they'd be drawn to it right away and just have to check it out and see what's this game all about.
Again, in fairness, this was the era of gray shooters.
Uncharted that's gonna really stand out is the fact that everything looks real, and the player is gonna be immersed completely into that game because you can believe that you are in that.
Okay, minor tangent. I really wish people wouldn't. I feel like immersion at this point is an overused term, and I understand this is back in the PS3 era when that was the thing that you just said. But man, people really overuse that term in that era. The word immersion and immersive. I don't think people even knew what that meant half the time they were saying it. Brief aside, we may continue.
Jungle, you're gonna see plants moving, you're gonna see real-time lights like the sun and the refraction for the world, like all these things, all these details that you see every day. We were able to produce all of that.
When we set off to make a brand new franchise,
Amy Hennig! Hey, it's been a while!
The action-adventure genre in its sort of classic form, but in a contemporary context.
So we look.
It's kind of weird to see Amy Hennig now, especially since she's not part of Naughty Dog anymore, and she's I don't even know what she's been doing the past couple of years. Because she was going to work on that Star Wars like 1313 game, and that got canned by EA because EA doesn't know how to handle licenses anymore. Yeah, she's been thrown onto projects that have just never come out, and it's a shame because she is probably still one of the best writers in the industry. That just has not gotten her due since the Uncharted franchise. Since Uncharted 3 in particular. It's also weird because, like, it was her, Druckmann, and one other writer. I forget his name. Amy Hennig is on Forspoken? What the fuck? That's her? I mean, you do what you gotta do to pay the bills. I would have forgot Battlefield 2 if EA paid me enough. But wow, I would have never imagined Forspoken. Story concept. That's a whole different thing. Story concept that means she actually, the description means she did the world building. That's a whole different thing. But in the context of modern day Naughty Dog, it was her, Druckmann, one other writer, and at this point, 2 of those people are gone. It is more or less just Druckmann doing writing for Naughty Dog now. We could debate his aptitude for it. I have some criticisms that I would levy at Druckmann over the past couple of years. But Bruce Straley, yes, I think he left Naughty Dog for, like, he was one of the people who was complaining about the working conditions. It's just very strange that at this point Naughty Dog is more or less the Neil Druckmann show. When, like, the era I know them most for, or I love them best for, was the Amy Hennig era, where she did stuff like Uncharted.
To a load of those matinee serials from the
he left it for you for.
Lots of chases,
That's right.
Running around looking for treasure, unlikely allegiances with a whole crazy cast of characters, lots of narrow escapes and risky situations. So we took all of this stuff and then started to look at how we might be able to reinvent it for the 21st century.
I mean, I do love treasure hunts.
With the look of Uncharted, we wanted it to stand out from all the other games that are being developed of the next generation consoles. We wanted it to have this lush, organic feel. We didn't want to have the same gritty and dark corridors that so many of these games have you running around shooting aliens and fighting monsters in. We wanted you to be in this lush, tropical jungle that really immersed you and made you feel like you could feel the moisture in the air.
It is ironic that he says that when, like, the finale of this game takes place in a dark gray corridor where you fight monsters. I just realized, yeah, we want this game to not be like the ones where you go into gray corridors and fight monsters, when that's literally what we did the first half hour of this stream. Was fought monsters in a gray corridor and fought people on a gray boat with wooden boxes. Yeah, we're fought minorities on a boat too.
Reality. And there's a little bit of vividness in the colors that we're choosing, and everything's got this sort of larger-than-life quality.
I will say even the grays are
Naughty
saturated.
Dog has a legacy to try and put its mark in the art world and in games. So shapes and color both have a lot to do with the readability of an environment, leading the player into an environment, and how you're supposed to feel inside of that environment.
So with the power of the...
I mean, we say endings are hard, and you're right, but also, we'll get into this more with Uncharted 3, because that's when, like, the seams really start showing, but Naughty Dog's process was not perfect, even in this, especially in this era. And we'll talk a bit more when we do Uncharted 3, but yeah, Naughty Dog has some flaws in its fundamental design structure at this time. I don't know if they've addressed them since. That we could kind of point to and say that's why some of this stuff feels weird in context.
PlayStation 3, we really felt like we could create environments that were believable and authentic. So we did a lot of research and tons of photo reference, but we also tried to put a twist on it.
Am I referring to
give
the
it our
like the
own
union
style.
stuff
So our
and like
concept
the
artists
working conditions?
would
It's a
take
whole
these
different
photos and
topic.
embellish them and
But their
really
actual
set the direction
pipeline has a
for
problem
the
with it
overall
that we'll
look of
get to in
Uncharted.
Uncharted 3. Kind
We
of really
invested a lot
highlights it.
time in our rendering engine to make sure that the differences in texture between a glossy palm frond and the rough surface of some stone would really be a good, clear read for the player and just lend all of this believability to the environment.
I
We always try to
keep meaning to watch the Psychonauts 2 documentary. It's always just off the thing I want to do right now on my list, but I feel like I would love watching that. I feel like that is a thing that I actually do need to watch at some point. And you're right, I really should. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
some things that's in a game that never been done before. Water was one of them, and we are really happy because it adds a lot to the realism of our jungle.
Whether it's ocean, whether
Let's say
it's
the
a
water in
river,
this game does look
stream,
pretty
a
good.
puddle, a waterfall, we really wanted to make sure that, you know, water was everywhere and that we were going to try to display it in a way that was never possible before on a previous generation of hardware.
I remember that reminds me of the of Ratchet and Clank Going Commander, that little patch of water in the Insomniac Museum that's like so intense on the PS2 that they can only render that one square in that one sectioned off room of the Insomniac Museum.
So we wanted the story in Uncharted to have historical relevance. So we decided to focus on a historical figure that, you know, everybody knew from their...
You are right. And that's kind of the problem with these behind the scenes, Onyx, is that I am kind of bringing in my own knowledge of Naughty Dog's processes into this video. But if you take the video on its face, it is less a behind the scenes and more of an advertisement for the game, which was kind of common at the time, especially in the PS2 era, where like a lot of demo discs behind the scenes were this kind of advertisement fluff piece of like what were the aspirations behind the game and what we were trying to do and what our goal was, and not a whole lot of like how does that gel. But we're working what we got. You are right that this is a genuine criticism of this exact style of bonus feature. And I feel like I keep hearing that with the Psychonauts 2 developer behind the scenes, it gets in the weeds of why game design can be problematic at times, or where issues arise in that pipeline. And that's what I want to see more. You are 100% correct on that front.
Fourth grade social study class, you know, Sir Francis Drake. He was out there basically robbing the ships that were coming back to Spain with all this gold from the New World. And we wanted to explore the areas that were kind of foggy in the history books where, you know, maybe not all the details were clear. And then what we did is we ran with it and explored the what if. What if Sir Francis Drake did have children? So our hero, Nathan Drake, believes himself to be a descendant of Sir Francis Drake. And there's treasure out there all over the place. And it's Nathan's job to go find it.
Treasure hunters, of course.
So the gameplay in Uncharted is unique. We really wanted to bring together elements that were in other games, but combine them in a way that you've never seen in a single
That's
game
six
before.
axis.
So we have
So
three
glad
pillars
they
of
cut
gameplay.
that
We have
from the
our traversal or platforming mechanics that, you
from
know,
the
we
remake, 'cause they
explored,
can't do
heavily
it
in our
on these
past games
controllers.
in Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. But we wanted to combine that with some really fast action, over-the-top gunplay, and then mix it in with the hand-to-hand melee combat as well. A combination of mechanics and interactions that, you know, you really haven't seen put together in the same way ever before.
My main
It is a
focus
third-person shooter.
on
Let's
making
not go
Uncharted
that
was
far.
Gameplay was how does the game feel? How does the game interact with the player? How does the world interact with the player? How enjoyable is the game? What's the fun factor on the game? And if it isn't fun, we try again. We come up with something new and do it again. We iterated hundreds of times on almost every major mechanic in the game. Our first several attempts at Drake looked fantastic, just like the final product, but They didn't feel good. It has to feel like a Naughty Dog game. It has to
Yeah,
be
that was the most...
on a dime responsive. It requires...
Yeah, I can't imagine what the other versions of the final boss were, because that was, like, this...
Making games is not a science.
For context, Uncharted 1's final boss is famously bad. Like, it is a notoriously awful final boss because this was the era where games were 6 hours long. You could get to a final boss in an afternoon. Like, you can beat this game from start to finish in an afternoon. So people would just get to the end. Unlike you can't, like modern games where games are 20 plus hours, you might not finish a game. Like, most people don't finish modern video games.
Just keep trying things until we find something that works.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the rough versions of that first fight of that boss fight were. Oh, I'm gonna get a drink real quick. I do love this game's soundtrack, by the way. It's really good. It's really good.
We drew a lot of our inspiration for our characters from the classic pulp action adventure stories that you've seen in books and movies and comics.
One of the hallmarks of this genre is the fact that you have a very relatable hero who's kind of an everyman.
All of the heroes are really recognizable human beings with all of our strengths and flaws. And we figured out that that was something very important for helping audiences connect with the character.
This is finally it. It's funny because, like, Nathan Drake in this game is kind of your everyman. But it's funny in, like, the context of the series from here on out how much different Drake becomes. Because part of the thing is that people who are like you and me don't do this. You almost can't be an everyman and do this. The person who would put themselves out on the line for a bit of gold is kind of wacko. Kind of weird. He can't be normal. And they eventually realize that in the later games and roll with it. And yes, of course, by everyman they mean a middle-aged white dude.
It's not just the fact that you have chases and gunfights and a heroine and all this other kind of stuff.
I also love that Sully
It's the
has
fact that
black
the
hair
characters are real people.
in this original
They can make
shot, and they
mistakes,
eventually made
but be
him gray
heroic.
later.
Nathan Drake is our hero, and he's the kind of guy who knows how to handle himself in a tight situation. But he's really just a guy in a t-shirt who finds himself in a difficult situation and has to rely on his wits a lot to save the day.
Save the day and kill minorities.
Elaine is a really cool character. I think she's something a little bit new and different for video games. She's a bright, self-sufficient young woman. She's very curious. She has this strong intellectual drive.
I would like... Was Elena Fisher novel back in the day? I found that that has to be a little that has to be an exaggeration at best. Because, like, maybe it was for me, but I was also a fucking teenager back then.
Has a kind of
Oh yes, you're right. She is, like, unlike most most female leads, she actually takes a very, very active part of the story. She's doing stuff for most of the game.
Then there's the character of Victor Sullivan. He's kind of that guy's guy adventurer. He's the consummate con man in a world of con men.
There's nothing here, Nate. Let's just keep that between us.
For the first time in Uncharted, we actually had
Yeah.
to cast actors who had stage or TV or film experience because we were doing motion capture for all of our cinematic cutscenes. So we have real stage and film actors coming in, getting in the motion capture suit, recording their voice while they're acting out the scene, which I think is really important because you capture that moment rather than having them try to pantomime to some voice dialogue they've already recorded.
The physicality that's demanded in doing motion capture and creating, you know, an action film, essentially, has been tricky. All the stunt work we have to do here, I mean, I go, is this my job? This is so much fun. But at the same time, the next day, I'm like, oh my word, I am so incredibly sore.
Well, I think the coming together of film, stage, and video and games is happening right here on the mocap stage.
And I think this is like the first game on Naughty Dog's portfolio where they really, really made use of motion capture. And this is something that they still do to this day. Like they use the same structure. Even the technology's advanced in the time since on Last of Us Part 2. They have the actors doing the motions in a mocap stage. So you get the performance and the voice at the same time.
I really staged things as if I was doing a play or a scene from a movie.
I had no experience. I was flying by the seat of my pants the whole time.
Although, by that same token, that is part of like the criticism of the Naughty Dog style, in quotes, where because you are essentially watching mocap performances from stage actors, you're not really a participant in the story. Not truly. You are watching a story unfold and doing gameplay motions between it. Which has kind of been the real criticism of Naughty Dog stories for the past couple of years. This is not new. But it really caught probably mainstream appeal around Last of Us Part 2, as people started really, really hammering home that line of inquiry. And I don't know if you're Naughty Dog, what you do about that. I don't know if you even bother trying to change your pipeline because it's been working for you for so long. But maybe they do. Maybe they do start to be a bit more interactive in how in the stories are telling. I don't know. We really won't know until the future. Although, if I had to make a guess, I'd say they're probably going to keep doing what they're doing because it's been working for them for the past 15 years.